For as long as I could remember, I was obsessed with the way the weather worked. My 6th grade science fair project was a feeble attempt at a tornado in a jar. Granted, I had managed to put far more vinegar in the mixture than needed, and the end result was a rather gloopy mess. But the effort was respected by my teacher, and my lab partner Dustin wasn't complaining that he achieved a C- for the first time. Despite a botched start, I was emboldened to try more. Spurned on by rainmakers like Charles Hatfield, who went to town with a specialized invention to bring multitudes of rain, I was hell-bent on providing that same service on a global scale. But instead of using a chemical mixture, I would use data and analyzation. Hesta, you know this weather making is not appealing to the boys, my father would say, his thick Polish accent never failing to make me smirk as he stumbled over the consonant, as gracefully as a cat on stilts. He meant well, of course, but the fact that he couldn't see where my life was going, even at the age of 21, was astounding. I would smirk every time he said it, and hunch my shoulders as I continued to work. Don't worry about it, Dad. Not really what I'm appealing to anyway, I would reply, trying to look at the trajectory of hurricanes and how categorization works in conjunction with the damage they leave. Image after image of ruined houses and ripped apart husks of metal strewn across the land. Oh well, the girls you like, they won't find all this weather talk interesting, you know. I just want my daughter to be happy and have many little ones. He would play it with his long silver beard as he did it, his feeble and dated attempt at understanding not lost on me, but amusing nonetheless. I don't even look over my shoulder as the work encompasses me, knowing soon that I would get a chance to present this to the people that I could truly charter the course towards my dream, the space station. I just like the weather, Dad. It's predictable but wild. It can cause devastation but bring life. It gives us nostalgia and it makes us sick. It's emotional and foreign. I want to understand it more. I want to understand. I wave my arms around me in a circular fashion, and nearly knocking over my desk lamp as I do so. This more, that means the work is what I love. People are just there. I finish, letting the words hang in the air for a moment as my dad leans in and kisses the side of my head. Then that is what matters, Boobala. Good luck. The night he shut that door was the no going back moment for me. If I had been admonished by him, my teacher, or my family, maybe the path that I had ventured down would be different. Maybe I wouldn't be in the untenable position of revealing what could potentially be the biggest scandal NASA has kept from humanity since the moon landing incident. I joined the ISS in August of this year, my predecessor being given early leave due to undisclosed health issues and a desperate need for a meteorology expert to observe what they described as unusual patterns forming over the oceans that they needed guidance on. I just so happened to be the right woman with the right PhD, and so it was decided. Once docking, my colleagues greeted me and helped me settle in. Captain Francis Lowther was a senior officer, a brilliant physics professor from Oxford with a stupendous sense of humor. He made those early days far less isolating for his company, especially with the constant US versus UK debates between research hours. My other colleague, Professor Soren Madsen, was a different story. The man was cold, distant, and snappy if you ever interfered with his research. He was entirely unwilling to collaborate unless it was absolutely unavoidable for him. He would stare you down, the whites in his eyes practically burning as he gave in and shared notes. When asking Captain Lowther why we had him on the station, He smirked and, using overly animated body language, said, "The man's brilliant, as is any scientist who's an arrogant dickhead." After a few days of settling in, we were pinged on an email from NASA. It was a standard email that consisted of systems check, itinerary for the day, relevant communications, and a sign-off. But once it ended, we were greeted by an unusual request from command. "ISS, this is Houston. Do you copy?" Captain Lowther looked at me confused before replying through the microphone. "We have a mission for Specialist Stankowski. We're sending over some information we've gathered over the last few days. There seems to be some kind of anomaly. Maybe a signal or energy emanating from the deep space and heading towards us. We don't know if this is a solar flare or something else, but we need you to investigate." There was a pause and I felt the sweat beads leak off of me and flow through the air. A perfect encapsulation of my fear in that moment. The information took time to come to us and we didn't want to interrupt before replying. It was always fair to leave a 30-second pause before knowing they were done. After a few more seconds, they continued. "There are a few rules that we are amending and passing to you as per the advisement of the director. We need you all to review this before confirming and sending back. These are for your safety and need to be reviewed before any further research takes place." I stared. I had been on the station for barely a week and they already wanted me to do some extensive research. That hardly seemed normal. I looked back to see Professor Madsen busy tinkering away with something, grumbling to himself about constant interruptions, and paying no further attention to the request. Typical. Turning to Captain Lowther, I opened my mouth to ask if this was normal, and promptly closed it as the email flashed up on the screen, and we both read it in silence. The enormity of the situation bearing down on us from all sides like the void itself. It read, "Crew of the International Space Station. This email will be brief and the guidelines will be simple. You are to adhere to them completely and absolutely. Failure to do so will have consequences beyond your present capacity to understand. 1. It should come as no surprise to you that there is no sound in space. But as we are rapidly learning each and every day, the rules are not ours to govern but to observe. And to that end, should you make any kind of contact, be it one that reciprocates a simple response, a complex one, or a physical interjection, you are to record the information only. Responding to this signal in any way is strictly forbidden. 2. You will receive no further communication from Houston until your experiment has been completed. Your equipment must be turned off for the duration. Radio silence is an absolute must, and once you have read over the data we sent, you will understand that too. Check in with the call sign, Somnambulist, upon completion. 3. From this point forward, if the call sign you hear back is not Houston, you are advised to shut down all main systems until the lunar cycle has been completed. When the event horizon is upon you, restart. 4. Lastly, if you or any colleagues begin to exhibit signs of paranoia, delusions of grandeur, or cabin fever, sedatives are available for you to utilize in order to calm them enough until you can find a better solution. As we finished processing the information, Captain Lowther radioed to confirm that he had received it, and that he would be disconnecting the equipment. There was a long pause before a reply was faintly heard. "Good luck. Godspeed." The transmission ends and I share Captain Lowther's exasperated gaze for a few moments. He swallows and I can hear the uncertainty in his voice. I didn't even need to ask him if this was normal. He looks over at the hunched over frame of Professor Madsen, who offers him a grim look before shaking his head and rededicating himself to his work. Well, we better get started then. We decided that it was best to do this in shifts so as to better record our findings with a clear head. I provided the necessary research template and what they specifically were looking for in order to ensure accurate data. Thankfully, when you have two of the most brilliant minds with you, it doesn't require a great degree of explanation. Captain Lowther elected to work the first shift, but surprisingly, Professor Madsen offered. I stared incredulously as the freckled, harried hand of my colleague leaned towards me, asking for the data. I would rather sleep through you two working than get a betweener deal with you at the end, he scoffed, the arrogance so pungent that it may as well added 5 pounds to his mass. I shrug and I hand him the information, trying my best to feign gratitude. I didn't want spoiled data. He takes it quickly before floating over to the workstation we had set up, a small arrangement of materials fastened down by a bay window that had a front row seat to the unending scope that was the void of space. Our turquoise sphere serving as a reminder of how far we had come and how alone we were. Whatever sleep I got that night didn't last. I was dreaming about being home, around my dad when we were at a stargazing event in my hometown of Salt Lake City, Utah. It was my 18th birthday, and as a celebration for getting into the college that I wanted, we went to see the stars at Antelope Island State Park. I can still picture how amazing the night sky looked then. Orbs of immense power and complexity, pumping out inhuman amounts of energy, just to remind us, these weird little bipedal hairless apes, that they're dead, that all things die. I felt my heart sink as I leaned back into the passenger seat, staring with my mouth open. I heard my dad speak next to me, his voice muffled as it through a window. Can you hear them, Boobala? Hear what, Dad? I turned to face him and I froze. His face was melted, the features like a wax figure left in the sun too long, the bridges of his cheeks like waterfalls of flesh, and the eyes hardened over and aimless. His jaw exposed, the tongue flailing about in a frantic manner as if desperate to escape. He leans forward. Can you hear them screaming? Listen. He leans in closer, his entire head shaking as if he had been knocked against the wall and was excising the residual effect. They need you to set them free. He opened his jaw wide, but no scream or moan came out. Instead, a pitch that I can't begin to describe rang out, starting off small and meek, but eventually filling my entire body until I too was resonating with it. The sound threatening to make my skull split open so it can breathe, the pain spilling out and large enough to fill the entire station. I woke up with a snap, the sensation of nausea hitting me like a freight train as I steeled myself and quickly remembered how utterly unwise it would be to vomit. I sat up to look around and to try to calm myself down. I decided to look out of the central chamber window at the Earth, knowing that it would set me at ease. I passed the research area, narrowly avoiding bumping into the 3 astronaut suits beside it, before reorienting myself to see the Earth as best I could. There's something so utterly indescribable about seeing those same weather patterns, cloud formations and storms you chased as a kid, play out now as an adult from so far beyond it all. I felt my stomach relax and I smiled, letting my eyes wander as I fixated on the eye of a cyclone forming over Japan. That's probably why, at first, I didn't see it. The frame creeped into view slowly but surely. First the hands, outstretched and welcoming. Then the legs, which were bent to the knees, and finally the head, frozen in what can only be described as pure bliss. Professor Madsen's body passed me like a macabre sculpture that had been knocked over, the scattering of which was lost to time. Spurts of his blood floated off, thankfully none threatening to hit the station and cause damage. I could not avert my eyes as the corpse of the most obstinate but logical man on the station passed me by before disappearing overhead and away from us. Behind him, the corpse fading from sight, the eye of the storm began to pulsate, rapidly turning a deep yellow and flashing several times in succession before returning to normal. I blinked, but it continued in this pattern. Storms don't do that. What the fuck is going on? I breathed, unable to convince myself of the things that I had seen. I backed away, passing the two spacesuits before rushing over to the workstation. The temptation to call Houston was so strong, but I was worried my mind was simply overreacting. I tried to convince myself that it was isolation and exhaustion, reminding myself that this wasn't even the first time an astronaut had reported seeing somebody outside of the station. I took a few deep breaths, then I resolved that I would at least read the notes before deciding on what to do. But the table was empty, and there was no data in sight. A single paper floated between the station and our crew quarters section. Scratched into it was simply, "Can you hear it?" I read the note over and over before calling out to Captain Lowther, hoping that I would get a reply. But the station greeted me with nothing but silence. Instead, I found him curled over in his bunk, in the fetal position and weeping, blood all around his pillows and dripping down his face and neck. His ears completely gone. His hands pulling at his hair as he quietly sobbed. I took a step forward, hesitant but concerned for my colleague and friend. I reached out to put a hand on his shoulder gently, knowing that he couldn't hear me. I hoped the gesture would be understood. His body relaxed before he turned over to me, a face riddled with fear and pain. "It's not a solar flare. It's not an energy source. I can't. Can you? Can you?" He gripped my face in his hands, feeling my ears before his eyes widened in horror. "You can. God, it'll take you soon. As it did with Madsen. This is it." He went limp, his entire body relaxing into the bunk as he cast his eyes to the ceiling. "The sounds will take us all, one way or another. We are nothing but vibrations." He began seizing violently, his eyes rolling in the back of his head and convulsing. I tried to hold him down and ease him, but the shakes became more severe. His legs smashing against the structure around him before he fell totally still, the opposite of Madsen's peaceful state becoming his final moments. I felt numb. I left the cabin and I began sobbing in the hallway, the tears floating in various directions, threatening to spatter my astronaut suit, sitting alone on its apparatus. But wait, weren't there? I stared at the space where the suit sat and I began to see a flicker, as if there were 3, and then 2, and then 1 all happening at once. Out of the corner of my left eye, I could see the waving corpse of Madsen, pressed up against the screen and frozen face peering at me. Lowther's body shifting from the bunk bed to the workstation to crack an animated joke. Everything was happening, and yet it wasn't. My head couldn't take it. I pushed my head down against my knees and I begged for all of it to just stop, screaming to nothing for a solution. I saw the research table out of the corner of my eye, and I noticed the data flickering in and out of focus. I don't know what possessed me, but I floated over to it in hope that it would have some answers to what the fuck was going on. I clicked on the latest entry and saw this post, this recount of events. It was almost finished, save for a few lines that I needed to correct. The sound told me that it required a platform to expand on, somewhere that it would immediately attract voracious readers. It could subtly awaken to the forbidden dulcet tones it sends out to the universe like a death rattle. I chose here, even utilizing the current algorithm and rules to get as many eyes and ears on board. You see, once you let the sound in, it never leaves you. The moment that we replied back, we let it in. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it speaks to me and it whispers promises that I could never hope to break. Madsen embraced it. Lowther feared it. But me? I became it. And now the opportunity presents itself for you to join me. In the dead of night, when you have begun to sleep and the stars are out, you'll hear the faintest of ringing in your ears. Maybe it's been there all your life, and you just acknowledged it as one of those things. Some of you may even be able to hone in on it when you tense your eardrums, oscillating the frequency. You're special. The universe is vast, unknown, and maybe we are alone in it, but there is a sound to guide us. I finished my report and I had a script to ensure this goes where it needs to. Turning back on all the equipment, my body rippling with the sound and excitement as I hear something come over the static. It's faint and I cannot decipher it, but it gives way to sounds of Houston. Somnambulist checking in. Research complete. Sending to you now. I smile. The event horizon shining overhead as the humming of my skull changes frequency. I feel my blood begin to rush. Good job. Welcome back. I lean forward, the sound reaching a fever pitch in my skull, as I hear my vocal cords twist and change before I even speak. Knowing the weight of these words will change the course of humanity as we know it. Houston, can you hear it?